Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back, everyone. Going to ask a question. 3 words. Here it comes. Who are you? It was a song by The Who that came out in the late 70s called Who Are You? But that's our question today. Who are you? What's your identity? Have you lost your identity? Maybe that's tied to maybe you're not nailing the things in life that should be yours now, or you feel kind of lost. Maybe it's, I don't want to use a cliche, but identity crisis. Many say that. I'm going to start there today. Dig into that with an amazing psychotherapist that has always some great insight and stories to go along with that too. Susie Engel is back on the program. How you doing today?
I'm fine, Steve. How are you?
Really good. Really good.
Good.
Do you confront this in your practice where after some conversation, it kind of reveals that the person that you're working with doesn't have a sense of who they are? They're not even really sure. And it may look on surface that, well, they got their stuff together, but they don't, because they don't know who they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes up and is quite apparent regularly in my work or work with my clients. However, it's not something that I can confront. I need to find a way to be able to help somebody understand, are you defining yourself by your profession? Are you defining yourself because you're a varsity player? Are you defining yourself because you're going to this school or that school? And that's not the definition of ourselves. Ourselves are all different aspects of ourselves.
When
Right?
you say aspects, would you say that also ties into, and we've talked about this way back, the different parts of our personality, not split personalities, but different parts of our personality?
Yeah, definitely. Parts of our personality. How are we in certain circumstances? What's happening to us in relationship? What, if we're a younger person, what's my identity when I interact with my family or with my parents or with my siblings? When we're talking about couples, am I a different person when I'm interacting with my boyfriend or my spouse or who, if we know each other, if we know ourselves, it's nice to kind of be ourselves in every aspect of our lives. That's the goal, I would think, is like be ourselves.
But know thyself. And do you feel that a lot of people get lost in their occupation? Because like you're at a party or you're just hanging out with a bunch of people. What's the first thing people say? Well, so what do you do? So that becomes your identity, but that's not really who you are. It's what you do. But that does kind of take over.
But that also is like that type of small talk is a real turnoff, because what happens if we were at a party and just started a conversation by saying, you're not going to believe what happened on my way over. I was just driving and all of a sudden, I think we had a podcast where I said, I was at the grocery store and this young woman had to stop her car because of pedestrians crossing to get in and out of the grocery store. And you could see her aggression building because she was so impatient. I think we talked about patience that day. But, that would start a conversation at a party rather than me saying, what do you do? And, organically, we talk about what we do in our lives. Organically, we say, this is my profession or my 2 professions. This is my hobby. I love to play tennis. Organic, I don't like it when people just interrogate and ask these words like, so what's your profession or what's your job? I like to start a conversation and people say, I was at the office the other day and da 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 da. And then we find out another aspect
That's
of
true.
this person. But it's not fun to think I'm only defined because I'm a psychotherapist or because that's not even like, first of all, nobody would guess I'm a
We
psychotherapist.
would just think you're a psycho. I'm kidding.
Yeah. Secondly, I don't want to be limited to just my job or my profession. I mean, I happen to love my two professions, but I don't want to be defined by that. So maybe this is the rub of our topic is if we feel if we don't know ourselves well enough, then things like our professions define us, and
Mm.
that's not fair.
Well, there's something that we're identifying here in that when we go to a function, challenge yourself instead of saying, as you're walking around, "Hey, how's it going?" But great party. Hey, but what do you do? Ask another question. What was the best part of your?
Yes.
Hey, Mike, nice to meet you. Hey, curious. What was the best part of your day today? So
Oh,
now you take whatever the question, take the focus off of the job. And I understand that people connect others with their job. And let's face it, you spend a big chunk of your day at your job, your profession.
yeah.
So it just comes up in conversation, but we're so used to asking somebody because we're not thinking, what to say. I don't know what to say. So what do you do? And it's,
So maybe the question though is if I'm if we get to a point in a conversation where we ask somebody, "Hey, what do you do?" or "What's your profession?" whatever that is, it's not a bad thing. It's not
no,
abnormal. It's
no.
perfectly natural. But the thing is, I have to ask myself, am I defining this person because of their job? You know,
Hmm.
am I labeling or judging this person because they're this or they're that or whatever that is? That would have to be my question to myself, not, is
For
this
sure.
person assuming something about me because I am what I am or what I do for a profession. But the other issue is, and I know you were about to say something, but we were also talking about how people lose their identity in relationships. And that
Hmm.
happens all the time. Does does a spouse treat their spouse a certain way when they like what's happening or they dislike, you know, then does that make somebody begin to lose themselves in the relationship? So
Well,
that's a whole nother
let's go.
part
Let's
of
go
this.
there.
Yeah,
Let's tie the personal relationships. The very close ones. Um, and I'm sure you deal with this in your practice often, where two people come together, they connect, they get married, whatever, and then over time, they don't even know who they are anymore because they're one unit, a couple. They've
yeah,
lost their individuality. I stopped doing that hobby, because now I'm all, dealing with the family, working on a house, blah, 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 blah. And then that person can very, very often get frustrated, resentful, because they really kind of have lost their individuality, their identity because of the
yeah,
relationship.
yeah. Yes. And I think that that happens a lot. And I think that part of this conversation has to say, why would we lose our identity? Where does that start to begin with
Where
in a
does it start? Because I
relationship?
don't have that answer. I don't even know. I don't even know where to go with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are certain aspects of ourselves. So now we can come back to all this continuity that we're achieving. But there are aspects of people who, maybe it's people pleasing. Maybe it's, I don't like confrontation. So when my spouse is a certain way, I'd rather comply or be more pleasing about these things because that's ultimately good for me because then I don't have tension or stress.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I'm beginning to understand I'm losing myself in these situations because I'm not maybe asserting myself, or I don't know how to assert myself, or I don't know how to gain balance in this relationship. And there are many ways to be able to achieve that. There are wonderful ways to be able to say to my spouse or to my partner or to somebody I'm in a relationship, or a young person in a boyfriend girlfriend relationship, or whatever the sexual orientation is. There are ways to be able to be my own agency and be supportive of my friend or partner or spouse or whoever these people are. But if it's a defense to be people pleasing, and then to look a decade later and say, I've lost myself in this relationship,
Mm.
then we, it's almost like a blessing. I mean, we talked about blessings with the failures. It's a blessing because now we're going to say, wait a minute, I've got to stop and figure this stuff out. How am I continuously losing myself, whether it is in my profession, whether it is in this relationship, whether it is in this pattern of situations, and kind of regroup about it. I mean, it comes back to like the beginnings of everything.
Well, let's look at some of the reasons why in a relationship somebody may lose their identity. Um, Certainly, what you just said, well, path of least resistance, I'm just going to, kind of suck it up. I'm going to let, give up a little bit of market share of myself
Yes.
because the other person may be a little domineering and you're just like, what just rock the boat, just go along with that. There could be one scenario, or you gave up a career because of your life, your family, your kids, or whatever it might be. What are
Yeah.
some of the other reasons that somebody might lose their identity in a relationship?
Yeah. And maybe some of those are good ideas at the time,
Yeah.
but when you start to realize you're losing yourself, you might say, wait a minute, at the start, I thought it was a good decision, and now I have to reassess that. So that's getting off of your question. That's off topic of your question, but I think it's an important point
I
to be able
totally agree
to
with you because we
have
don't we would never say, you know what, I'm gonna give up me. I'm in this relationship. I had an identity. I thought I knew who I was. I'm just gonna throw it. You're not gonna intentionally do that. It's gonna happen over a period of
un-
time.
and unconsciously, I would
Yes.
say,
Yes.
and to be able to have some sense of flexibility and constant assessment of our situations, I think is a life skill to be able to say, gee, this isn't feeling right. It felt a little bit better at the beginning, but now let's reassess this and let's think about, was this really a good idea? Was it a good idea for me to give up my profession to build a family? Maybe there could have been some balance. Well, it was a good idea at the time, and now it doesn't feel so good. So now let's reassess. Let's be flexible. Let's look at it because nothing is set in stone.
No.
We don't have to be so rigid that, oh, I put my profession on hold. Now I'm too old, or now it's too many years. That is just not true. That is not true. Now we have to be able to say, how do I get back in my profession? How do I get up to speed? How do I ease into it? How do I ease? Maybe it's a family decision, and one of the parents gave up their profession to raise the family, but the kids are independent, and we can still. So now, how are we going to help the kids understand that it's great to have two parents working? It's
Mm.
great not to have all eyes on the kids. And revisit this. I think that getting back to even though I've kind of gotten off track, but this is important anyway. But to get back to what are other things that contribute to people losing themselves, I think there are probably countless ways.
Oh, and what about this? Did you ever really know who you were
To begin with.
to begin with?
Exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, that's where I would go with all this. I would say it's always coming back to some sort of foundation. Were you encouraged to, to seek that independence and think differently and think creatively? And were you supported in that? Or if you disagreed, whether it's like a family religion or we're going into the holidays, holiday traditions, you know, if you want your own tradition, how is that going to be accepted or supported? And is there somebody in the family that says, good for you. I'm glad you're making decisions for yourself. I'm
Hmm.
glad you're starting this family tradition for yourself. Take as much time as you need. We'll get together another time during the year. Is there somebody in your family or in your social circle who is like that? Or are you berated or bombarded with people who say, that's selfish of you? And what about us? And what about me? There lies a big reason why people lose themselves
Oh, yeah.
because they're kind of um intimidated into compliance.
Or afraid. There's some fear there,
Yeah.
depending on the type of relationship. Um,
Well, and afraid, that's what intimidation does. It scares people into, you know, giving in or keeping quiet and keeping quiet is a loss of self because you're not expressing yourself and you're not asserting yourself and you're not letting the other person know there is a different perspective, even if the person doesn't like it. It's, oh yeah, we're
um,
all over.
I no, but I'm right there with you. But I think a lot of it goes back to the fundamentals of things like boundaries, putting value on yourself. Where if you start losing yourself, people take advantage or say, "I can take care of this. Yeah, sure, I'll do that for you." Man. Instead of saying, even if it's your kids, you love them, but it comes to a point, no, I can't do that because I'm taking care of something that's important for me today.
Yes.
It is what it
Yeah.
is. You got to do what you
Yeah.
got to do, for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. No, and I think that that's important. I think it's vital. And I also think it's really important for us to allow other people to cope with that,
Mm,
to adjust to that.
yes.
Because if we're like now, okay, if we're always, oh, sure, I'll do that for you. Oh, sure, I'll do that. And then we start realizing, oh, no, it's not working out for me. I'm sure you understand. Whether the person understands or doesn't understand, that's up to them to start to cope with. But I sure wouldn't want to be in a situation where I've lost myself.
Mm.
I don't know any time, even as a youngster, how that would be for me because I'd rather not fit in than lose myself.
Well, first thing that comes to mind is a conversation I had with somebody earlier today, referring to two people we know, and it looks like they got their stuff together, but they're not succeeding with their goals. They're not moving forward. But on the surface, they got to look. One could be a model, like got the world by his hands. It's all going on right over there, but they're struggling, and it looks like maybe they lost their identity. They're not even sure who they are, and that's why this everything is not synchronizing because they're really not sure. It's like a leader of a team. If you're not focused on what you're doing, you're not going to have a win. Well, guess what? You're leading your own team at that point. You.
Yeah. And so part of that is that's good information. Whoever you had this interchange with, whether it was a friend or whoever this is, that's good information. Their bodies, their emotions, their thought process is saying, hey, Susie, take a good look, listen to us. We're trying to let you know there's something going on and we have to change the course of this direction.
Yes.
It's not a bad thing. It's good information.
But a lot of times you personally don't realize it. You
Well,
don't realize it.
that's right. But I mean, what do we realize if we were to be in a situation like that? We know we're not feeling well. We know we're not content. We know that we have lots of ideas or interests that we're no longer pursuing. Then those are all important kind of important signals as well to say, wait a minute, I need to just kind of regroup and one step at a time. I mean, I think it's overwhelming for people, but I think it's a malady of society. It's like,
Well, I honestly, that's where you come in because we're not seeing it. Where you may see it. Well, how come you don't do that hobby anymore? Well, what changed over there? It's that dialogue, within therapy that's going to bring those things out. And you can do it for anybody anywhere, right? They just have
yes,
to reach out to you.
yes.
How do we do that?
Uh, the best way is through my website. So it's Susan Engel LCSW.com. And there's a contact request. And hopefully these conversations that we have, Steve, stimulate people to broaden their perspectives or to start thinking,
100%.
And
It-
hopefully it's
Guess
motivating.
what? In the relationship thing, been there, done that. Just what we were talking about. I felt like, it happens to many of us where
Yes, it's
we're
common.
right. You give up this because of this, but maybe you don't have to give up all of that for this. What's this? Well, it could be family, could be a situation, whatever it might be.
Right. I mean, there's a ton of middle ground. Sometimes I put my arms out here and I say, if you think like from my wrist to my wrist is middle ground, we have a lot of leeway. We don't have to be so polarized, so binary. Yeah.
Thank you for today. Okay, we always jump in here like, what do you want to talk about? I'm not really sure, and then I wonder how can we talk about that for like almost a half hour, but we can.
And
We
it
do.
went so fast.
I know, right? Yeah, I want to tell everybody it is Susan Engel, Engel, with a hyphen LCSW.com. Thanks for being here. We'll catch up soon, okay?
Thanks, Steve.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.